Heather is becoming a dear friend who has joined our local community and is so proactive and socially aware and energetically and spiritually aware of entering spaces and fixing spaces and relating people to each other, even difficult people to each other. And she came here actually telling me of her lens experience that actually transformed her life. So
I don't know where to begin and how to frame people who are involved, because I want to be sensitive to who they are, but I was going through a difficult period after divorce, and I've had what I would call non-consensus reality perceptions or mental health issues for most of my adult life. And I met a young man at a Pacific Northwest medicine circle who had what you might call reactive attachment disorder, and powerful, but also powerful spiritual sorts of perceptions. And he ended up staying with me because of a bunch of events that happened in his life. And he connected with Rich at a bookstore, who is also a farm member, and brought Rich back to my house, and we did some hypnosis and talked about things. And then it was through Rich that I was introduced to Stephen's book. And at the time,
that was the first book, The Healing Power of Neurofeedback.
The Healing Power of Neurofeedback. And at the time, I had gone through a big life transition. I was a business owner, but I was losing my memory, and I was having those brain injury symptoms that you would call combativeness and anger, and just inability to connect with other people, and becoming very isolated, and may have been having stroke-type symptoms, may have been having seizures. I don't know, because I wasn't able to access any medical care. So my life was completely imploding around me. I was $70,000 in debt and about to lose my house. And I read the central nervous system screen in the back of the book because I couldn't get through the whole book because I didn't have the attention span or focus. But I knew from my previous training as a Waldorf teacher that this list of symptoms were symptoms that I was experiencing, and I needed to get help. So I took my money that I had a little bit, and I was still making income, and I went and I found Emily Elliott in Seattle, who's a lens practitioner, and she mostly sees children, but she heard me talk about what I was experiencing, and then she saw me. And I started crying during your presentation, because the first time I had lens, of course my visual field opened up and my hearing just went berserk. I'd never experienced a normal level of hearing. I'd always kind of felt like I was running around in a box. And then I realized that I used to be a singer when I was a child, and so I started singing spontaneously a lot. And I also started singing with overtones spontaneously. Like I could sing more than one note at once. And so I'd heard a friend of mine in Portland who had been an overtone singer, and I called him on the phone and I said, Enrique, can you show me how to do tube and throat singing? And he said, get down here, you're already doing it, we'll work together. And so that was my lens experience, was of recovering functioning and recovering creativity in a powerful way, but also finding a real non-linear opening up of my creativity and my singing voice. I was in a rock band within 2 months. I started recording. I'd never been in a band before. We started touring around the Northwest. All sorts of interesting and chaotic things started happening. And everyone around me was saying, what is this? You're going absolutely crazy. You should be locked up for how you're living. And it was with the help of Emily, who was always so grounded, but asking me leading questions like, are you getting your bills paid? How's this working? You know, how are you making money? And Bill, who was a teacher in the Pacific Northwest medicine, who knew about spirit possession and he knew about soul retrieval, and he was singing to me over the phone and telling me stories. So I went through, like, it's hard to describe it in 10 minutes, a great tableau of experiences of the self and the subconscious and sort of the transpersonal realm, you would call it politely. And I ended up coming here last summer because I was really curious about what neurofeedback looks like in clinical practice. And I don't know if in my life I will heal enough to be able to be linear enough to work in a professional setting with lens. I'm curious about that, whether I'm supposed to become a musician or an artist, or whether I'm supposed to work in this field. I've always tried really hard to fit in, but I'm becoming a lot more comfortable with what it is I'm becoming, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
And so that's a really good place to be, because I've always had to cover things up of what I was experiencing. And now I don't feel so inclined to do that anymore. Yet it is hard when you don't have a home, and you, at one point, like a real sense of grounding for me was around the house I lived in for 15 years, and I don't have that. I'm estranged from my family because of what happened initially when I started to have a sort of an awakening process. So I'm curious as to how that all sort out. It's really a great adventure.
Yeah, Heather, it's been a great pleasure to not only get to know you better, but to realize that we share both the lens in the mental health world and the transpersonal and
Right.
shamanic world. Just say a few words, if you would, about how you feel that neurofeedback could facilitate spiritual awakening or opening.
Well, I would say when I've done some reading on Indian healing and EEG work that was done in the 70s, and I'm curious about the role of the temporal lobe as an access point of opening consciousness. I looked at there's some research on the God helmet. Who was that? Penfield who did that work?
There is Achille and Newberg have done a lot of the stuff on the parietal lobes and the temporal
Right.
lobes in terms of the God.
It just seems like
Syndrome.
teachers I've talked to, even people who I know are very perhaps ungrounded in a consensus reality kind of sense, but they'll even like point, it comes from here. This is where I receive my vision from. They'll point to the part of their brain. It was interesting to learn about the parts of the brain and as they relate to psychic perception, and then see people directly point to it who had never been schooled in that. And in the shamanic work, like in Santeria, for example, they have something called rogacion, which is tapping on the head, and sort of rubbing like powders and Florida water into your head to cure you of spirit possession. So that it's an indigenous neuropsychological approach. And I think when the lens is definitely accessing these areas with frequencies in the same of sound, in the same way that if you're in ceremony and people are drumming according to a certain cadence, it's auditory driving you into a different state of consciousness.
Wow.
And so those are the things I've been thinking about. I mean, I don't have the long years of training in that, but it's just where I've come to from piecing together other parts of my life where I learned about these things.
Do you think that it actually enhanced your spiritual?
Absolutely. But also it can be to an extreme too. It's really good to have that guidance, to have someone competent to work with who's going to say, yes, you're opening, but you could go out into the cosmos, but we kind of want you here too. Isn't that always the tricky part? Is when someone has an awakening, is it going to blast wide open if they're a mother or a father and have a family? Or are they going to run off on the road away? How's that all going to be integrated? So that's the real question for me, is providing, what is a safe container, and when do people need to bust out and do something completely different that might seem crazy to some people? That's always a question.
How about your clowning? Did you begin clowning after?
I did begin clowning after doing this. It was interesting. A clown was born, Honey the Clown, and Honey loves bees, of course, and Michael was just here.
Yeah.
Honey the Clown was born, and she frightened a lot of people. But one of our very well-known Olympia clowns had me as we would do parties together, and we would take people into the cream time by throwing pies in their faces. And
Into the cream time.
into the cream time, from the past to the future to the present moment, which begins right now, is how we would help people.
Maybe we could do some informal, just movies with Honey the Clown. That would be really kind of cool.
That would be fun.
Yeah. I don't know whether you knew that I had a career as a clown.
I heard that, and I
yes,
figured as much from.
Yeah, I was in a
being around
traveling
with
circus
Dave
for a
Fig.
while. I was a character named Dr. Ducks.
Oh
Who
no!
cured people of radiation sickness and other kinds of things.
I bet he did.
Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you.
All right.